Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Underwood Podcast, the gold standard of all things that are fun. Joining me today is my co-host, Anderson. You might notice that we do have one of our co-hosts missing. She's out tumbling around and having her fun. And we're big fans of Star Wars, so she doesn't really have a whole lot to say about that because she's a little bit of a girly girl, but that's okay. We'll find some stuff to talk about with her. But right now we're going to talk about the prequel trilogy and kind of go through it movie by movie. I've got my trusty iPad here to kind of as my cheat sheet, so I may make sure I don't miss anything, scenes, characters, and things like that. So first, before we get into it, one little gripe I have immediately about Phantom Menace, and it's not really a gripe, it's just kind of like, really? I know when George Lucas created the Star Wars movies, he intended them to be for children, right?
Yeah.
And maybe the original trilogy, yeah, I could see how it could be made for kids.
Yeah.
Empire Strikes Back, it's a little bit darker, but then we're introduced to the prequel trilogy, which came out in 1999 is when Phantom Menace came out. And then we get 3 years later, we get Attack of the Clones. And then 3 years after that, we get Revenge of the Sith, and that'll wrap it up for the prequel trilogy. So what are your initial impressions of the prequel trilogy?
Well, I will say it does have one of my favorite movies of all time in it, which is Revenge of the Sith.
Yep.
We already talked about that movie in I think our first video.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's definitely probably the second best trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
I would say.
Yes.
Because I definitely don't like the sequels. Those are not that good. With Rey and all that stuff. Not good. I don't know what Disney was trying to do there, but I think the originals. I feel like since they're more original with George Lucas, they are a bit more better, and I like the storyline a bit better, but I like how also the prequels kind of show how all of it happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really nice to have.
Yeah. All right, so we get the title crawl, and we kind of get an idea of what's going on. And I'm trying to put myself into a kid's set of shoes. I saw this when I was I guess I would have been in my mid-20s.
Yeah.
So I could understand the gist of what was going on with the Trade Federation and blockades veering a trade. I was like, all right, if this is a movie intended for kids, are they really going to understand like what the whole Trade Federation and blockades and what that all really means?
Yeah.
I mean, it just kind of seems a little varsity, if you will, for someone of grade school age, and maybe I'm wrong, but the original trilogy, just to compare it to the original trilogy, A New Hope and Empire and Jedi, like it's pretty straightforward what's happening. There's not a whole lot of little subplots and things like that with the Trade Federation blockades, battle droids, and all that stuff. But let's roll right into it and talk about the Phantom Menace. So we get the title crawl. And then we're immediately sent to Chancellor Valorum's ship with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan.
Yep.
They're on the ship, and they're they're there to negotiate with Valorum and Gunray, I think.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
And
it's been a minute since we watched.
Yeah, and it kind of turns sour because the Jedis are kind of there to not really negotiate, but to kind of almost force the Trade Federation into bowing to their will. It's not really much of a negotiation.
The Jedi way.
Yeah, and then so they eventually the Jedis begin their invasion with an army of battle droids.
Yeah.
Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan escape to flee to Naboo.
Yeah.
There's where we're introduced to Jar Jar.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Jar Jar?
Well, there has been some theories he's a Sith Lord. I don't really get that.
Yeah.
I just think he's just a funny dude, funny looking creature, funny creature in general, I guess.
Yeah.
I like his long tongue. It's funny. There's one scene where Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan go to Tatooine and find Anakin, and they're at the dinner table, and he tries to eat an apple, and Qui-Gon Jinn grabs his tongue.
It's like, don't do that again.
It's so hilarious.
Yeah, it is pretty funny. Jar Jar, he's okay in small doses. I can see why some people kind of find him annoying, and he's like too much of a character. And you can kind of see in the follow-on movies that he has kind of a smaller roles in each one of those movies. And then we get the underwater. Jar Jar takes them down to the underwater little civilization they have down there to try to get their aid because they understand, like, without their aid of Jar Jar's kind of family, it's going to be a very difficult fight against the battle droids and those that eventually come. So there we are transported to the capital city of Naboo, where we rescue and are introduced to Padme, Queen Amidala. And the group make their escape aboard the Royal Starship, that big silver starship. And then they reach the planet of Coruscant.
Yes.
The ship is damaged while they pass through the blockade. And so they need to land in Tatooine for repairs.
Yeah.
Things happen. They make their way into the whatever town that is in Tatooine.
Like
and that's
Mos Eisley. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah. And that's where we're introduced to Anakin. And his mother, who's a slave. They're both slaves, really.
Yeah.
And then we're also introduced to Anakin's project, C-3PO.
Yep.
He's just kind of bare bones at that point. He's not really
very smart. He's like very smart for building like a whole entire
he's
machine.
He's a little engineer for sure.
Yeah. He made
And I think Qui-Gon kind of senses that Anakin is force sensitive.
The chosen one.
Yeah, and so he radios back to Obi-Wan and some of I think that maybe the other Jedi Council, where they wanted to get a sample of the metachlorian count, which is kind of like what kind of gives the Jedi it's I guess a chemical in the blood that kind of gives or enhances your powers and stuff. And that's where they decide that they want to try to free both slaves from what's his name?
The cicada guy.
The whatever the little gambler is and stuff like that. So he's basically kind of the slave master.
Yeah.
But they agree that, well, Anakin can win his freedom in a pod race, and in addition to parts for the repairs for the ship.
Yes.
And so we have the pod race, which is pretty cool. That's kind of a fun part, especially for the kids.
Yeah.
And that's where we're introduced to. We kind of get to see Jar Jar, that little Fredo guy or whatever.
I don't know.
The little green guy. Yeah. And Jar Jar, zaps his little tongue against the little electric, current, and he's like, he's like, I can't breathe. And so, anyway, Anakin wins his freedom. Shmi, of course, does not.
Yeah, he tries to make him lose by it's like he wrecked his power generator looking thing. I forget what it's called.
Yeah.
But it like made him go. It like made one of his engines not work during like the middle of the race.
Yeah, so he has to kind of do some mechanical stuff and troubleshooting.
Literally while he's racing, like
yeah,
he just,
through
like,
some pretty fast stuff. So it's a pretty that's kind of that's a fun scene. I can see that being a fun scene, especially for the younger kids that are watching this movie. So anyway, they're on their way back to the ship, and that's where we are met by Darth Maul.
Yeah.
Just a menacing character. He's got those horns. He kind of looks like the devil almost, and he's got the we'll see later that he's got the dual lightsaber and stuff. But eventually, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are able to get everyone on board the ship. R2-D2 I think has a role in this, where he kind of is able to kind of get them all right and ready, and that's where we're just like, meet. And then when we get Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan to like, hey, this is Anakin Skywalker, and they all kind of shake hands, they're like, hello there.
Yeah, hello there.
And so they make their escape and escort Padme to Coruscant so she can plead with her people's case to the Galactic Senate. Qui-Gon asks the Jedi Council permission to train Anakin as a Jedi, but the Council says no, that they sense a lot of fear in him, and that he could be made to flee to the dark side. And then there also we meet the Naboo senator, Palpatine,
Yeah.
who, when I first saw, we don't really know what the Emperor looks like, in the original trilogy. We can kind of get an idea of some of his characteristics, but as soon as I saw the Naboo Senator Palpatine, I'm like, I know who that is. He's not all the way there yet, but you can tell he's pulling the strings.
Yeah, we do find out in Revenge of the Sith that unfortunately he is the Emperor.
Yeah, he is the Sith Lord that everyone's been fearing. So anyway, a few things happen. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are ordered by the Council to accompany Amidala to investigate the return of the Sith, which they believe has been extinct for more than 1,000 years, and so they're trying to kind of come to do some investigative work of like, who is this Darth Maul? Like, what's going on with this guy?
Yeah.
We get the Federation droid control ship and like all those battle droids, that are landing on Naboo.
Yeah.
And those battle droids, they just keep going out in like their little thing. They all just kind of pop up.
Yeah.
They're like, holy cow, how are we going to do this? And now we've got Jar Jar's people, the Gungulans, I think they're called.
I think.
And they're just kind of a primitive kind of people. They've got those big balls, those balls of electricity, and kind of they get that big force dome or shield dome.
And my favorite part of the movie happens when the guy goes.
Yeah.
That was so funny.
Yeah, and then we also are able, things happen. The battle is the battle.
Yeah.
And the master ship for those battle droids is basically destroyed or rendered useless, and all the battle droids just kind of flop down into nothing, and they just kind of push them over and like, oh, I think we did it.
Yeah.
And so that comes to the end of the movie where they're doing that big kind of parade. Queen Amidala's there, the Chancellor, Palpatine, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan. Before all that happens, we get, could I forget, we get the battle between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Darth Maul. Yeah. So talk about that a little bit.
I think that scene should not have ended how it played out. It was really unfortunate that Qui-Gon died. He was a really powerful Jedi. Of course, Obi-Wan later, he defeats Darth Maul after Qui-Gon dies because he kind of falls off the ledge a little bit and grabs on to like this thing. I don't know what it's called. And thankfully, he jumped up, grabbed Qui-Gon's lightsaber, turned it on. Darth Maul was shocked. He was standing there, which I don't know why. Like, honestly, he should have just, like, struck. But that's part of the movie I just didn't really get. And he, sliced him in half, which...
he falls down into the pit, and magically enough, via the...
Yeah, earlier on in the saga, Skywalker saga, he comes back. It's so weird why Disney did that,
It was a little strange. Yeah. But so anyway, evil's defeated. Obi-Wan, we lose Qui-Gon. Obi-Wan is now
has to take care of Anakin.
Yeah, got to take care and train Anakin, and that's where we come to the end of the movie when we've got the parade.
Yeah.
We've got Palpatine, Amidala, and young little Anakin. He's now got the kind of the little haircut going on.
Yeah,
and he's
Padawan braid.
Yeah, and exactly. He's ready now to be trained as a Jedi.
Yeah. And
that's basically the gist of the movie, without getting too deep into the weeds.
Yeah.
But entertaining movie.
I would rate it a good 7 or 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I'd give it 6 or 7 overall. But I mean, compare it to other movies, like especially in the Rey saga.
Yeah.
I'd give it easily a 7 compared to the other ones. But then we move on to Attack of the Clones. This movie is kind of growing on me.
Yeah.
It started out as not. I was like, okay, we're
politics type.
Yeah, a lot of politics going on. We'll go through this. Now we've got. We'll get into the plot, and this is basically taking place 10 years after the Battle of Naboo.
Yeah.
So Anakin's now kind of a teenager, if you will.
More like early 20s type.
Yeah. And the Galactic Republic is being kind of organized by former Jedi Master Count Dooku, who we'll meet later on as things kind of go on. But that's basically the gist of it. The Queen is now turned senator. They travel to Coruscant, and that's where Anakin and Obi-Wan. There's an assassination attempt on Padme
by Jango Fett.
Well, this is the one that the creature that kind of they chase through they chase through. That's a pretty entertaining sequence.
Yeah,
where,
I like that.
They're flying around in those little kind of Jetsons looking cars and stuff.
What I meant to say was Jango Fett was like the boss of that one bounty hunter.
Right. Yeah, you're right. So this is where they kind of go through all of Coruscant. They go through that little nightclub, bar, whatever it is, and then and that's where the assassin that was trying to take out Queen Amidala got struck by that dart by Jango Fett, and you kind of see it like it turns into like a human face into like almost like a lizard kind of face, and it's like, man, that's a little weird. But anyway, so now Obi-Wan is sent to Kamino, which is where
the clones are being manufactured.
Yeah, the clones are being manufactured, but it hasn't been approved by anyone really.
Yeah.
It was approved by, I guess, some Jedi that they said was from a long time ago, and he's like, he's been dead for over 100 years or something like that. Meanwhile, they're still turning out all these clones. We made Jango Fett, his son Boba
Fett,
and meanwhile, while that's going on, Padme is escorted by Anakin back to Naboo, and that's where they kind of both begin their little lovey-dovey. They start to really kind of take a liking to each other, and all that happens. So there's a battle between Obi-Wan and Jango / Boba Fett, who's now he's basically just kind of a kid, he just wants to get on the Slave One, and they fly off. But I guess Obi-Wan's able to kind of put a tracking beacon on him, and they're able to escape to Geonosis.
Yes.
So what do you think up until this point with kind of what we've talked about, while I kind of read what's going to happen next?
I basically approve of everything that's going on. I think everything is going pretty good on how, the movie's supposed to be going, I just say that.
Okay. Anakin is also having visions of his mom, Shmi. Of her being kind of tortured by the Sand People, the Tusken Raiders.
Yeah.
So he says he tells Padme that he needs to return back to Tatooine to rescue her.
Yeah.
So they go back to Tatooine, and we find that Anakin, he's just on a mission to find his mom. He finds her, she's dying. He basically, kills all the Tusken Raiders.
They foreshadow part of his like Darth Vader stage, and that one scene right there is really important for the next like whole Star Wars saga.
Yeah. Because
that part right there is just like 50% added anger and fear to the Sith. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So he's not full on Sith yet, but he's kind of on the interstate now, kind of on his way to becoming a Sith.
Yeah.
He's just becoming angry, fearful, vengeful. He's killing people, which is not really the Jedi way.
Yeah.
You're supposed to remember you only use it as self-defense, not just out and out attacking. You can tell he goes back to Padme. Anakin's troubled by it, but he's still mad, that they basically killed his mom, because he misses his mom.
Yeah. He didn't see her for like 10 years.
And so now we go back to Geonosis, where we're introduced to Count Dooku, who is basically a fallen Jedi.
Yeah.
some things happen there. Dooku meets Obi-Wan in the cell, and remember this is where Obi-Wan's kind of frozen in space there, and he's like, and Dooku encourages Obi-Wan to join him, and he's like, "I'll never join you, Dooku."
Yeah.
Anyway, he's able to escape, and then we get into the battle.
Yeah.
With
Best part of the movie.
Yeah, we get Mace Windu, we get Anakin, we get Obi-Wan, we get Padme.
You get like all the Jedi.
All the Jedi. Django. The whole kit and caboodle. Like everyone's there, and this is going to be an all-out battle, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
They get those big creatures that are trying to take them out. They're all tied to those big poles and stuff, and they're eventually able to escape those, and then move forward with their battle. Yoda flies in with all his, clones.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty fun battle to watch. It's pretty entertaining. But they're basically ultimately able to defeat the enemy there within the Colosseum of that where that battle's taking place. Jango Fett gets killed, and then Boba Fett's basically holding up his head like, oh geez, and then it kind of gets a little dark there. But anyway, Yoda kind of comes to save the day, and then they pursue Count Dooku.
Chase them to like this dungeon looking thing.
Yeah, and that's where there's a fight between Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Count Dooku. Anakin eventually, he gets his hand cut off.
Yeah.
But then ultimately, Dooku's able to escape.
Well, yeah, Yoda came in and he kind of forced him a little bit, and then he got scared and escaped.
Right. There's a little bit of a lightsaber duel there. Anakin's arm is basically injured.
Yeah.
Let's see. Dooku escapes via his little solar ship, to Coruscant, and delivers basically the initial architecture of what's going to become the Death Star.
Yes.
To Darth Sidious / Palpatine.
Yeah.
And that's basically where we end with. Let's not forget, we also see that back in Naboo, there's a shot with Anakin and Padme secretly getting married.
Yeah.
C-3PO and R2-D2 are basically the witnesses there.
Yeah.
And that's basically where the movie wraps up.
Yeah.
So overall, it's a movie that's kind of growing on me.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I was just kind of like, "What is this?" But I've kind of grown to like it as we've gone forward. What are kind of your overall interpretations and feelings after watching that movie?
Well, I really like the last 30 minutes, even like the last 40, because when they're in that droid making factory.
Yeah.
That scene's all right. Just.
It's kind of neat to see how the stormtrooper, eventually who are going to become the stormtroopers, but the clones, how they're kind of developed and how they're all origins of Jango Fett,
Yeah.
And how Jango kind of kept one for himself to raise as a son, who we know is Boba.
Yeah.
And so that's, we kind of get some questions answered as far as character development, who's kind of, how these characters kind of rise, and we get a lot of those Jedi out there, and we basically see everything that you see kind of in the both in the video games and some of the animated series of all the different Jedi, and that'll carry on further into the next movie we're going to talk about, which is the last of the prequel trilogy movies, Revenge of the Sith.
Yes.
And like you said, and I agree with you 100%. This is easily the best of the three movies.
Yeah.
And I would put it in the top 3 of my all-time favorite Star Wars movies easily. So what are your initial thoughts about Revenge of the Sith?
I mean, there's just so much to talk about. I feel like, it's also cool. I like seeing Anakin go to Darth Vader. I like the final battle on Mustafar. That's always fun. Mm-hmm. Order 66, Kenobi defeating Grievous, Anakin defeating Dooku.
The Wookiees.
You first see Chewbacca.
Yeah.
In that one cut scene where Yoda's escaping Kashyyyk, Chewbacca and this other Wookiee like help him, like his escape pod.
Yep.
All that stuff. It's just a phenomenal movie overall, I feel like.
Yep. So let's get right into it. We start off with Obi-Wan and Anakin orbiting above Coruscant. We've got a whole bunch of ships out there.
Yeah, whole battle.
Those little buzz droids, and Anakin and Obi-Wan are basically just kind of doing their pilot stuff. And then they're eventually trying to rescue Palpatine from General Grievous. But little do we know that Grievous, Count Dooku, and Palpatine are all basically on the same side, but they're just trying to lure the Jedi into there so they can defeat them, which ultimately they are not.
Yeah.
There's a battle between Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Dooku. Obi-Wan basically gets kind of knocked out. He kind of gets that thing that falls on him, and he's kind of out of the fight for a little while.
Knocked out, yeah.
And so it ends up being just kind of Dooku and Anakin, who ends up, getting blades both of his hands off.
Yeah, all that
And that's
stuff.
where Palpatine's basically like, kill him. And Dooku's kind of looking at like Palpatine like, what? What are you doing?
Yeah, because
they're supposed to be kind of on the same side, but Palpatine is also starting to see that Anakin
could be potential for his next apprentice.
Exactly. Instead of there can only be one master, one apprentice with the Sith. And so we go from basically Palpatine and Dooku. Dooku's now out of the picture, so now basically Palpatine's grooming Anakin to become his apprentice.
And we don't really know it yet, but we find out later.
That's right. So then basically they crash land onto Coruscant. That's a pretty cool scene of how they kind of land that ship, half a ship. And so they get off the ship. Anakin then reunites with Padme. Where it's revealed that Padme is pregnant with a child. And then soon after, Anakin kind of gets some visions of Padme dying during childbirth, and he's obviously fearful to let that happen. And he's doing everything he can to prevent that.
Foreshadowing Darth Vader.
Yep. Some things happen with Palpatine and Anakin that are, basically trying to get him to lose.
Yeah.
There's a discussion where Palpatine basically tempts Anakin during that little kind of opera scene.
Yeah, because he tells him about Darth Plagueis and how he can stop people from death.
Yeah, and he's like, how can I learn this? He goes, not from a Jedi.
Yeah, because, Padme's, she's probably going to die.
Yeah, he just has these crazy visions that she's going to die in childbirth, and he just wants to do anything possible to keep that from happening. Yeah. So we can kind of see that Palpatine is like really kind of got his claws into Anakin now.
Yeah. And
he's basically, Anakin's about 80% the way there.
Yeah.
He's pretty much almost a goner.
Yeah.
Palpatine tempts Anakin with the dark side of the Force. And then it's revealed that Palpatine is a Sith Lord and he's behind the Clone Wars. Anakin goes back to the Jedi Council and says, like, Sidious, I think, is the Sith Lord we're looking for.
Yeah.
Specifically to Mace Windu, who confronts Palpatine, basically arresting him.
Yeah.
And that's where Mace and Palpatine get into that lightsaber duel.
Yeah.
And Sidious is using his Force electricity.
Yeah.
And then, Mace is fighting it off, and then he basically fires it back at Palpatine. And that's where Palpatine kind of gets his face all disfigured.
Yeah, and then like Anakin.
And then Anakin is like, no, you can't do that. He needs to, and Mace is basically like, he's too dangerous to be left alive. And Anakin's, no, you can't. He's the Jedi way. It's not the Jedi way. Blah, blah, blah.
He must stand trial, but even though he is like the
and then
trial.
Palpatine then just sends like a whole ton of electricity at Mace.
Yeah.
Basically, and then that window that they're fighting next to breaks open, and Mace kind of basically just falls out the window.
I know, like, also before that, Obi-Wan went to a planet to defeat Grievous. That was a cool fight. And then Yoda went to Kashyyyk to help the Wookiees because the droids are trying to...
Yeah, and let's talk about that just a little bit before we get into Order 66 and Anakin's turn to Darth Vader. So you're right, we get Obi-Wan going to his planet, that they have information that General Grievous is there. He confronts and finds General Grievous, and he just whips out all his lightsabers, and there's a pretty, kind of cool fight scene.
Hello there.
Yeah, hello there. And then ultimately, Obi-Wan is able to defeat General Grievous. Meanwhile, Yoda is on Kashyyyk with the Wookiees, and they've got their own battle going on there. And basically, it's kind of just an all-out war amongst a whole bunch of planets that we don't really need to get into super big time. But we know that all these things are happening. Yeah. Meanwhile, back at the where Mace Windu has just been basically killed, and the Emperor is now the Emperor.
Yeah.
He puts the hood on, his face is all deformed.
Yeah.
And basically Anakin says, I submit myself to your teachings. And he goes, you are now known as Darth Vader, and now Anakin is full on Sith.
Yeah.
And then Palpatine issues Order 66, which commands the clone troopers to turn against the Jedi and basically eliminate all of them.
Yes.
And that's pretty kind of shocking to watch, and it just kind of stinks. So they're killed, all over. Planet after planet after planet. These Jedi that are leading these clone troopers are now being killed. And that's where Yoda and Obi-Wan are basically kind of mainly the last two that are out there. We have that scene where Anakin goes into the little Jedi temple where the little younglings are learning their little tricks and stuff like that, and basically he just kills them all.
Yeah.
That's pretty sad.
Yeah.
And then now Obi-Wan is trying to seek out Padme to warn her about Anakin's turn to the dark side, because he sees video of now Darth Vader executing the little ones.
Yeah.
And Padme is shocked. She can't believe it. She's like, no, this can't be happening. Obi-Wan figures out that Anakin is the father of her pregnant, her children. And they basically it now Obi-Wan and Padme basically seek out Darth Vader on the Mustafar, where they basically know that they have to kill him.
Yeah.
When they arrive, now Darth Vader discovers Padme, saying, "You brought him here, Obi-Wan. You brought him here to kill me," and he basically force chokes her. She falls to the ground, and it's just kind of assumed that she's either knocked out, dead. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
But I guess she's just knocked out, because we'll see in a future scene that she survived the force choke. But in doing that, it leads to the battle between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader.
Well,
Anakin / Darth Vader. Yeah. Now it's kind of the same thing. That's a pretty cool fight there with all the lava.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just like one big volcano that Mustafar is. They do the battles there on the lava, and there's on those little pods and stuff like that. That's kind of fun to watch. And then there's a little verbal exchange between the two of them, saying, "Hey, I loved you like a brother," and all that stuff. And they battle. Anakin kind of flips up into the high ground.
And Obi-Wan does an illegal.
I'm sorry, Obi-Wan, flips up to the high ground, and Obi-Wan's basically like, "Don't do it. I have the high ground." And go ahead, and I know what you're going to say, but go ahead.
So basically, a lot of people don't know this, but the move that Obi-Wan did when Anakin jumped to, try and fight even more was illegal, because the Jedi ways explain that if somebody's in the air, you can't cut off two limbs at once. And so obviously Obi-Wan does that, and then Anakin kind of falls to the edge of the lava, is burning, and is all that stuff.
Yeah, he's got almost all of his limbs cut off. He's darn near on fire.
Yeah.
I think Obi-Wan just kind of assumes that he's dead.
Yeah.
So he kind of flees the area. Obi-Wan does.
Quickly.
And then Palpatine, or now the Emperor, I guess we can call him, finds Darth Vader, Anakin. He's still alive, so they get him. They take him to the big ship, the command ship.
Yeah.
And that's where you see him doing, he's basically strapped, and he's getting all the skin, the burnt skin and stuff taken off of him. That's where he's given basically the Darth Vader gear, all the breathing stuff, the helmet.
Yeah.
He's got basically, you kind of see him take his first kind of steps. He hasn't really figured out how to walk yet.
Mm-hmm.
And the Emperor basically tells Vader that, it seems that in your anger you killed Padme.
Yeah.
And then he just kind of gets all mad. And he's like, no! And, everything, he blows things up, and things are just he's just angry.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, after that, Obi-Wan and Yoda. So Padme gives birth to twins, unbeknownst to Darth Vader, who only thinks he's got basically one.
Yeah.
Well, he's got twins, and that's when she dies in childbirth. I guess they said she just lost the will to live.
Yeah.
So now Yoda and Obi-Wan need to conceal the identities of the twins to protect them from Darth Vader.
Yeah.
So Obi-Wan takes Luke to Tatooine.
And then one of the senators take Leia
On Alderaan.
Yeah.
To the other senator that we know. Organa, I think.
Yeah.
And then Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru basically are handed Luke.
In, yeah.
And that's basically
pretty much it.
That's pretty much the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And we get the last. I think the last kind of scene we have is Darth Vader overlooking basically that big window that's in the kind of the command ship, the big Star Destroyer, and we see the outline and the initial construction of the Death Star.
Yeah.
And so now we know it's like, okay, it's game on now.
Yeah.
And that obviously will lead into, the original trilogy that we know of, as well as some of the intermediate movies, Rogue One and some of the some of the TV series.
We also see more in the Obi-Wan series, which I personally like.
I love it. That's a great movie. That's a great series.
Yeah.
But we'll get into those at a different time.
Yeah.
Final thoughts on Revenge of the Sith?
Well, I feel like I've said everything, to be honest, but just best movie ever, in my opinion.
It is a pretty cool movie.
There's just so much to take in, too.
Yeah, I mean, things are happening. Every single scene is something kind of dramatic. There's not a whole lot of downtime where it's just a bunch of talking back and forth of boring stuff. I mean, things are kind of just happening throughout the entire movie. I enjoyed it. How all these characters are revealed, the Emperor and Darth Vader, the newly formed Darth Vader, how he got all his gear and why he needs all that mechanical stuff.
Yeah.
And things like that. So I think that's about it for the prequel trilogy. Again, I would say, I would agree with you. I would put it number 2 of the trilogies. Original being the first, and then the Rey series being easily last. I don't know what the heck was going on there. That's not going to be a fun discussion. I'm going to decide to have it because it's just like it's just kind of
boring-ish, pretty much.
Boring, and they just kind of go against.
Like the Emperor, the Emperor comes back. Like, what is this?
Basically, it's a slap in the face to Return of the Jedi. Where the Emperor dies at the end. At least we, are led to believe. And I just didn't enjoy. I didn't enjoy it. It's just I didn't like it at all.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that at another time. Any final thoughts?
No, I think we got it all.
All right. Well, we're coming up on July 4th, which is tomorrow. I know you and your sister and I are going to go out of town. To go see some family, do some fishing, hang out by the beach.
Yeah, it's going to be
fun.
See
some fireworks, see some family. I think I said that already. But that's always fun. So it's going to be hot.
Yeah.
So with that said, I hope everyone has a fun July 4th. Stay safe if you're traveling. Stay safe about the fireworks. Everything.
Don't blow yourself up.
Don't blow your hand off. You don't want to end up like Anakin and just be left with one hand, one working hand.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's it for this latest episode. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe on @The_Underwood Podcast with a capital T and the. We'll talk to you after the holiday break here. Yeah. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Bye.
See ya.